Hello, hello. It's been a few weeks. You guys, how was your holidays? I loved mine. That's why I haven't been on, because I was spending some good time with my family. So a couple weeks ago, I did part one of the Depression's Cure, Don't Think, Do, all about ruminating. And it talked about leading up to like what ruminating is. And there were two things it said at the very end: learning to notice when it's happening and learning how to redirect your focus to some other activity. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today, is what do we do? Like, how do we stop ruminating? So the first thing is just being aware, breaking the habit, awareness. What is it about depression that causes us to dwell at length on negative thoughts? The answer has to do with human memory. Our memory is associated with cues. They've done studies that if you study for an exam in a blue room, then you take the test in a blue room, you'll do better. Not necessarily having to be that color, but you know what I mean. The memory cue of the blue room helps you remember the things you studied on the test. Our brain uses our mood state as its single most important memory cue. For example, when you're sad and despondent, it brings up all sorts of sad memories, and you can't seem to dig up the happy ones because all the sad memories just coming in. Have you ever seen the Disney show Inside Out? Think about the little girl when she was sad and all those sad memories started coming. So when people are depressed, their intensely sad mood will cause sad memories to percolate, unbidden, up to the surface of their conscious awareness. So these memories will just keep going around and around, and it's a vicious cycle of rumination. And when Dr. Lardy would bring this up to his classes, there was a lot of people, or his TLC groups, there were a lot of people who were like, oh, yeah, I ruminate all the time. But they weren't aware that they were doing it. They weren't aware that they were dwelling on all these negative thoughts because it was just so effortless and automatic, especially for someone that's depressed. So think about like when you're driving home on a familiar route. Sometimes you arrive home and you're like, oh, like I'm already home? You don't even realize that you have made that whole trip. It's just automatic. You're on autopilot. So in similar fashion, people who have depression know the well-worn path of rumination by heart. They can navigate it on autopilot. They'll just be sitting there ruminating, and then they realize, oh my gosh, I've been doing this for a long time already. So that's the first step in breaking the habit of rumination, is simply increasing the awareness and noticing that it's happening. And once you learn to pay attention moment by moment to when you're ruminating, when you're not, then you'll be well on your way to breaking free. And Dr. Lardy has talked about ways that we can start doing this and having this awareness and giving us some tools. In fact, one of his first tools he suggests is taking inventory. So when you write down hour by hour what you're doing or how your day was going, that will really help you break down and see when you've spent that time ruminating, like maybe what your triggers were, what you're doing at that time. And he says this might sound like a lot of work, but it really doesn't take more than 5 minutes to complete, and you'll probably find it easiest to do if you have a log. Like some people will just take a notebook with them and just have it with them in their bag or whatever you carry in your car. And for example, he started with 6 a.m. all the way down to 5 a.m. So he went through a whole entire day, hour by hour. And he has this chart that says, okay, at 6 o'clock a.m., I was asleep, but then I laid awake in bed. And for about 25 minutes, I ruminated. And then rate it with your mood. Like when you're ruminating, how is your mood on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the worst? And for example, he put a 7. This person was laying in bed for 25 minutes just ruminating, and they had a really negative mood. And then you go down, okay, I was in the shower. How long did I ruminate in the shower? 20 minutes. How was my mood? Oh, I was doing a little better. It was about a 6. Going through the day, work. I didn't have time to ruminate. I was too busy working. And then I had something trigger me about a deadline, and so I ruminated about that deadline, and that put me in a really bad mood. So as you can see, there's different triggers that can happen. I know this is not effective, but here's kind of like the chart he's showing. I don't know if I can do this, but I'm going to try to get up a website, and so I can add some of these resources, because I think it would be really cool to actually, if you don't own the book, to see the table, to have the example, and even maybe a blank table that you would want to use. but I've never done anything like that, so I'll work on it. So during the first week or two of monitoring your rumination on a regular basis, you'll gradually come to recognize, you'll be more skillful at catching when you do it, and you'll be able to notice like the patterns of your rumination and when it's happening, and you'll even think, there you go again, you're doing it, it's time to stop. And you can start getting those mental cues that it's time to stop. So one of the things that's important is to watch out for high-risk situations. People typically ruminate and feel the worst when they have nothing else to occupy their attention. You have nothing to do, nothing on your mind, so your mind starts to wander and starts to ruminate. And given the depressed mind's inexorable drift inward upon itself, the single biggest respect for rumination is simply spending time alone. That's why in a lot of my posts, like on Wednesdays when I talk about people, we need people. We need that social interaction. We need that connection. We need that engagement, because being alone, especially for someone that's depressed, cannot be a good thing and is not often a good thing. Spending time with others usually helps counteract brooding, unless that person also broods. So when you're forming your relationships, you don't want those toxic people in your life. You don't want to spend time with the negative people, because then you'll just be ruminating together, and that's not good. So potentially, if you're spending time with someone else that dwells on negative thoughts, you could just be outright with them and just say, hey, look, when we're together, sometimes we get negative and we ruminate. So let's agree to not give in to the voice of rumination when we're together. Another high risk, so first one is being alone. The second one is watching TV. You might think, well, TV, that's a distraction. Well, this is not the case, because usually TV takes our mind off of things, and it's easy to just sit there and then some shows aren't that interesting, so we just think about it while we're watching mindlessly. Have you ever done that? So add to the fact that depression impairs our ability to concentrate, including the ability to stay focused on a TV program. It's no surprise that watching TV is often a recipe for disaster. The same basic principle applies to any situation that fails to fully engage our attention. So some of the things his patients have told him that have been triggers for them, or high risk factors for them, have been sitting in traffic, listening to sad music, driving, mindless chores, daydreaming, just laying around the house. So those are some of the things. I'd be curious to hear if you have any more to add to the list. So what we need to do is break the habit by redirecting our thoughts and our actions. Once you've learned how to catch yourself ruminating, we need to stop it. The solution involves learning to redirect your attention, to turn away from the inner world of thoughts and memories to the outer world of people and activities. Simply put, it means doing more and thinking less. So what happens when we start doing less and less? And the less we do, we just sit and we brood. It only serves to make depression worse, which then leaves the left frontal cortex less active, which makes it even harder to do things when you're in that depressed state, because your left frontal cortex is so inactive. The vicious cycle can just run on and on, but there is a way to reverse the cycle, and that is to nudge ourselves to do something, even just to respond to a gentle prompt from someone else. It temporarily increases our activity and helps to stimulate that frontal cortex, which boosts our mood and leads to a bit of reduction in depression symptoms. In other words, by simply engaging in activity, any activity, we can change the brain in a way that helps reverse depression. So finding the motivation to let it go. I mean, that sounds all great and okay, I want to stop brooding, I want to stop. But how do I do that? Like, how do I find the motivation? So it's a good idea to address up front the potential obstacle to kicking the rumination habit, and that is the lack of motivation. Because it's just easier to sit or to be in bed, or to mindlessly play video games, or whatever your thing is. Sometimes that's just easier. So what he said is that he's learned over the years that sometimes people don't want to let go of the habit. Even though they realize how harmful it can be, they still want to hold on to it. And I'm grateful that my husband is not that way. He's like actively trying to manage his depression, which is really helpful for me. But I've also learned that these things are good for me. Like, I'm not a depressed person, but I find that I ruminate on things, and it's not healthy, to think about things, rehash things over and over again. So this has been helpful even for someone that's not a depressed person. One of my patients a few years ago, Dr. Lardy explained that rumination can be seductive. It promises to deliver the goods, but it rarely, if ever, delivers. Here's how she put it. You need to stop, but it's like, if only I spend a little more time thinking about it, then I'll figure things out. I'll feel so much better. Now, deep down, that's not really true, but it feels like while you're ruminating. So it's just easy to give in and keep at it. And then before you know it, an hour has passed and you're still spinning your wheels and nothing has changed. So then Dr. Lardy talks to his patient. He says, let me make a deal with you. When you catch yourself ruminating, give yourself permission to do it. Like, it's okay. It's normal to ruminate. But set a timer. Resolve to shut down the process as soon as the timer goes off, if not sooner. Some people have trained themselves to do it sooner. It's a really remarkable strategy, and he's said it's been proven to work. So people have even written down their brooding thoughts or what they're ruminating on, and simply putting your thoughts down on paper actually makes it easier to stop thinking about them. You may have seen this principle work the last time you found yourself writing out a shopping list or a to-do list. I've also heard at night, like if your brain's turning to have a brain dump, and just write down everything on a paper before you go to bed. So it's on paper and it doesn't have to be in your brain anymore. And it just helps you relax and know, like, okay. It's all on paper. So you feel less need to keep rehashing it when it's on paper. Another idea is to find activities. So when you catch yourself ruminating, it's important to have a list of engaging activities to capture attention. As a rule, we can put an end to brooding only when we're caught up in something else and something that has to be absorbing. So finding activities that work for you. So I could give you a list of things that work for me, but they might not be effective for you. So you have to really think about that. It's not a one-size-fits-all. Some of the examples he's given is engaging in conversation. Carrying on a two-way conversation takes a surprising amount of mental focus. So much of it is impossible to ruminate. In fact, he asks all his patients to make a list. And here's another table. I don't know if you can see it, but. And what he does is he has them list the people that they know they can trust and contact. So how they list the people so that, for example, he has mom, dad, best friend, sister, brother, neighbor, boss, high school friend. That's just his example. And then how comfortable are they with that person on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most comfortable. They rate how comfortable they are. And then they rate how available they are. Because you might be super comfortable with someone and want to talk to them, but they're not that available because of their schedule. So take a moment, and if you are needing to do this, make a list of your top 5 to 10 people that you could contact. The next time you're in need of a conversation partner, it's best to begin by contacting people you feel particularly comfortable with, especially if they're also likely to be available. So a couple weeks ago, I actually had this happen to me. I had a friend contact me, and she was feeling depressed, and she was having a lot of negative thoughts running through her head. And I felt really humbled and grateful that I was on her list of people to contact. And I was able to go spend some time with her, and we've made a plan to do some exercising together and kind of help her when she needs it, and she knows I'm available. Sometimes you may be able to increase your level of comfort with some people on your list by simply telling them your plan. And oftentimes people will really feel like I did, well, thank you so much for trusting me enough to tell me about this, and feel free to call me anytime. So even if they're busy, if you tell them your plan and why, they're going to make time for you. Also, another example is pursue shared activities. Many of the most effective anti-ruminating activities are the ones we can share with other people. There's something about the mere presence of another person that helps keep our thoughts from drifting inward. He shares an example of a lady that started volunteering at, Habitat for Humanity. And she just started feeling better, and the Dr. Lardy thought, oh, you're making friends. And she said, no, it's actually not that I'm making friends. She said that the very thing is that just because she was doing work with other people, that helped her stay engaged. And even though they didn't really talk much, they weren't like bonding. She still said that if I had done those things by myself at home, I wouldn't have enjoyed it, and I probably would have ruminated the whole time. But just because I was in the presence of other people and I knew I was making a difference, making an impact, it worked. So another idea is playing interactive games. Games represent a particularly effective way to end rumination. This can be a physical activity like tennis, golf, softball, racquetball, volleyball, pickleball. I have not tried pickleball yet, but I've heard it's awesome. Have you tried it? Bowling, so on. These are really effective. Also, the Nintendo Wii. Some like retirement or nursing centers have used the Nintendo Wii to keep their patients active and mentally engaged because it can be a little bit physical in front of a screen. Card games and board games are also anti-ruminating. There are also websites that you can connect with other players and play games online. There is the option to listen to music, but you want to make sure like it's not sad music that's going to help you ruminate and brood. Music that's upbeat and takes your mind off of whatever your triggers are. It needs to be upbeat and positive. And listening to books on tape. So one thing about depression, and my husband, I've really noticed this, he cannot concentrate to read a book. So it's really better for him when he listens to books on CD, books on tape, audiobooks. And so those have been effective for him rather than sitting and reading, because he just doesn't have the attention to do that. Watching videos. So this one is not super great, like he's already said, TV, but we do have our favorites. We have our favorite videos, we have our favorite films, we have our favorite shows that can be effective because you're really engaged in the plot, that you're engaged in what's happening, and so then you're not ruminating during that because you're interested in it. So keeping a stalker on hand of some of your favorites. Another idea is just brainstorming. You know what's going to work for you. Brainstorm. Over the years, his patients have brainstormed a lot of options like cooking, shopping, listening to radio, playing with their dog or cat, visiting an animal shelter, karaoke bar, volunteering, watching children play at the park, writing a letter, needlepoint, hiking. What is it that you want to do? Even going back to before the depression really hit, like what were your hobbies? What were your interests? What were your engagements? Go back to those things. And take charge. Earlier we discussed the importance of identifying the high-risk situations in your life, times when you're most likely to get stuck in the extended bout of brooding. The most effective way to address such situations is by taking an active approach. Map out each day's schedule in advance and fill in those times of potential inactivity with engaging activities. Almost done here. The last part he talks about is just achieving balance. Some of the effective anti-rumination strategies that we looked at, for example, socializing and exercising, are really antidepressant in nature, and most people benefit from doing these. On the other hand, some of the activities they covered, like playing games and watching videos, are valuable mostly because they happen to provide a momentary distraction from upsetting thoughts. But some people can actually get addicted to doing those types of things, like just find that you're in your own little world on the gaming internet world or whatever. Or for example, he shares a story about a girl that had started playing video games, surfing websites for her anti-ruminating activity. Then it led her to avoid other things that were really important. So she stayed holed in. She wasn't connecting with other people physically. It was online. And then eventually she stopped going out to grocery shop. Everything could be done online, and that was not good. So that had a negative effect. So we need to make sure we have the balance. When she brought up the dilemma in their group, there were knowing, sympathetic nods all around, because depression can completely rob a person of their energy. That even simple tasks start to feel overwhelming. It becomes all too tempting to avoid them. So sometimes avoidance actually becomes a habit, one that can linger on. So when we use distraction, the process can still be turned around fairly quickly, but there are a few important principles worth bearing in mind. First, when an avoided task feels overwhelming, break it down into smaller tasks. So if like you're thinking, oh gosh, I have got to clean the kitchen, but it seems too overwhelming, so you're just avoiding doing it altogether, break it down into smaller tasks. Okay, the first thing I can do is load the dishwasher or unload the dishwasher so that I can load the dishwasher. Maybe then after that, wipe the counters. And then maybe I'll wash the pots and pans. Then I'll sweep the floor. So if you break it down into smaller tasks, it's more manageable than just saying, I've got to clean the whole kitchen, because that does sound overwhelming, even to me. So it's helpful to also make a list of tasks that you've been avoiding. So start with the simplest task first, like paying a bill, and then do it. And it brings a sense of accomplishment, and then it helps you create a sense of momentum to keep going and have that accomplishment. And taking up long neglected tasks, it's important to set realistic goals for how much you can accomplish, because another thing I've noticed with my husband is that he'll set a goal and then he'll fail at it, and so then he'll get discouraged about it, and then it will be a cycle again. So we've talked more about making SMART goals, measurable goals, things that are, and not too many goals, just starting with a simple goal, and that has been really helpful. So everything in moderation. In overcoming rumination and in healing from depression, maintaining a sense of balance is crucial. Spending some time on not long neglected tasks is beneficial and can be anti-ruminative, but devoting too much time to chores can be overwhelming and can make things worse. Likewise, a moderate use of distraction like playing video games or watching movies or surfing the internet is fine, but when it keeps going, that is not good, because then you're avoiding responsibilities and you're wasting your time. So for most people with depression, the balance between thinking and doing is easily lost, and rumination becomes a persistent habit that borders on addiction, amplifying depressive symptoms and standing as a formidable roadblock to the path of recovery. But by putting into the practices and principles covered in this chapter, to be aware of when you're ruminating, take note of it, and then make a plan to stop, and have a list of anti-ruminating activities that you can turn to, and a list of conversation partners. Then with all these things in place, it can be vastly rewarding, and the world that we're designed to live in can be brighter. So this is part 2 of chapter 5. I'd love to hear what you like best about it, where you're coming in from, and if you watch this on replay. So have a great day, guys. Next week, antidepressant exercise. We're going to be talking about being physically active. See you then.